Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting edition of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Vaughn Smith, and this is our Cisco Cloud Fundamentals series, and we're back in a part 2 for our Cisco CloudCenter components. And back again as well is the one and only Mr. Ronnie Wong. How are you?
I am doing well, Vaughn. Thank you again for joining me as we continue on and taking a look now at the components of CloudCenter. We've just started in the previous episode where, of course, we showed you how to deploy an application or an application profile, I should say, right? We walked you through the steps of actually setting up just a basic application profile. There's a lot more technical details in the background, such as where these things are going to reside, URL links if you're actually hosting them somewhere else, other things that you have to be able to do. But overall, though, we did show you how to build that. And now we're in the process of deploying an application. Now, I chose a pre-built application profile for us because it's supposed to just take a short bit of time. But we're about to see whether or not it's actually completed yet is what we're going to do. So let's go to my desktop as we continue on in the journey that we're doing and taking a look at the Cisco Cloud Center. Now, there's a couple of different places that you will end up looking. And overall, though, the first place is when we are actually in the middle of this, okay, is if I scroll down. So let me make sure everybody kind of remembers, okay? So in the last episode, we had left it like this, where I said, hey, it's actually starting to deploy, and everything was actually there. But now, down here where we have that single VM essentially running here, see if I can click and drag that. Oh, because I'm zoomed in. Sometimes it doesn't like it when you try and click and drag and whole thing. Oh, never mind. Okay, it's not going to work for me right now. But what I'm looking for is right here. These are essentially the properties of what's in that screen over there on the left hand side. I was trying to make sure I said that right. Over on the left hand side. So you can see where the job status says job running. Okay, and that normally means where it actually said before job starting. That means it's actually getting the process up, getting it to do what we need to. If I scroll down, I'm also looking right here where it says running, and then it gives me this GUID is what it gives me, okay? That's the individual list that it's actually doing for me as I take a look at that. Now, see if I can scroll that over too. Well, if I click on the action list, this is where I can tell if it's actually been deployed or not. If it's not, I click on action list, it doesn't show me anything, but now I can see stop, terminate, reboot, okay? Remember that stop and terminate, there's a difference here, okay? Stopping means stop, but keep it. Terminate just says go ahead and stop it, and termination means don't use it, is what it actually gives us that ability to do. Now, if I want to find out more details, I can also click on the little drop down beside that. Oops, let me see if I can do it again. And what I'm looking for, if I scroll down here, are a couple of different options, okay? So how can I tell if this thing is actually up and running? Down here where it says access, you see these two little strange icons. So I hover over it, you'll actually notice that this one, the thumb, says SSH, okay? This one over here is in the VNC. In other words, it gives me that access to do so. So if I select this one, and it's trying to actually connect, so it doesn't look like it's actually up yet. If everything was up, I would actually see that access into that Splunk server right now, and I don't actually see it, so it looks like it's waiting. The interface is guacamole here is what you're actually seeing. So it's actually waiting, so it looks like it's in the process of actually completing, but it's not complete yet. So you can see something like that, yeah?
I'm sorry, what is guacamole?
It's just the interface that you actually are seeing. So, you know, developers, they name stuff differently and, you know, as well. But you can see a lot of that different stuff going on, okay? Now, as far as this, notice that there's a strange host name here, Vaughn, okay? That's a weird-looking host name, okay? But that's the VM that it created. And this is where Cisco Cloud Center is managing this. So you and I don't ever have to change this to what name that we want to. Cisco Cloud Center has actually created this for us. And if it's actually completely done, let me click on, I need deployments. Deployments here, it does say it's fully deployed. Now, how can I verify that when I haven't done that? Well, let me go ahead and bring up the VM web client here. I'm trying to see which one should be better. Try this. Sometimes these particular web clients, they get a little bit testy on us. This one is, oh, I got to remember the cloud. user. See if it gives me access in. So in a moment here, I'm just going into the underlying infrastructure of where that particular virtual machine should have been created, okay? Unless I've typed it in wrong and it's just having a hard time connecting here to do so, okay? So I should be able to see that in just a moment. It does take a little bit of time the first time you actually launch it here because it's building everything that it needs to. We want to make sure we add in all the extensions to do that. And this is where we'll also end up seeing a different view of using VMware Workstation in the way that we can manage this. Most of us that don't know, especially the way that Cisco worked, they actually worked with VMware quite extensively to help develop their cloud solution. So they rely heavily in terms of VMware. But while we're just waiting for it to spin, okay, and do what it needs to, let's go back and start taking a look at something else, and we'll come back here in just a moment, okay? So right here, this is where you're looking. And notice that you have deployment, which means it's off and it's ready to go. It's doing what it needs to. And notice the two different environments, production and non-production here, okay? Remember that this means it's using the standard hardware such as a vSwitch, a virtualized switch. In production, this one means it's actually using an ACI to do so. And that means it's going to turn around and do this programmatically instead of just trying to connect Vaughn's machine to a virtualized switch. It will actually do more and allow us to actually deploy a lot more pieces into that environment as we need to. So production will actually do that, where it actually is now done by programming instead of us trying to connect what we would call the virtual servers together too. All right, that's what I was hoping as I was explaining that, okay? All right, so let's go back and now see inside of the actual web client, I'm clicking on what it says vCenter inventory list. And then from there, I need data centers, I believe. And it's just a little bit of a lag here. Did I hit the right one? I got to make sure. Oh, hold on. Maybe it is under, it should be under data centers, but I am not seeing it there. See if I can go in here and find it. There we go. Okay, so I was looking for that number is what I was looking for. So if I remember right, here's the one, and Vaughn, just remember these last four numbers here. 7ABA, okay? So 7ABA, and if I can minimize this a little bit, we can show that. Go back over here, and we'll select the Splunk server. Now remember, okay? So there it is, the 7ABA. This is the one that we just created. This is the one that's actually Vaughn's server here. And Vaughn, you didn't have to know anything about VMware at all, okay, for you to create that server, okay? So that's where it starts hiding that complexity like it said that it would actually do for us to help us out and do what we wanted to. So the same thing goes if you and I were also going to create it in different ways too. So another aspect of doing this that goes to the complexity is that APIC login. Okay, so the application-centric infrastructure. I knew I couldn't remember something. So here's this application-centric infrastructure. So if I do admin, and then the super secret password, see if I can log in. There we go. Okay. Now, I didn't actually create that second deployment model. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to change any of the settings right now. But I can go to tenants, maybe, tenants. And now I can go to clicker. I know it's a strange thing. So here's what the product used to be called before Cisco bought it. It was CLIQR. It's pronounced clicker, as far as I know. So before, the CloudCenter essentially was called this, and now it's called CloudCenter instead, is what it's called. So the application profiles, notice right here, Vaughn, that pet clinic that I was showing you a little bit earlier, it's right here. If we were to create one, it would also send it over here, and then we would also be adding it in here too, okay? And the reason why we're not creating another one because the next one that I was going to create takes like 15 minutes as well. Okay, so and we're not really doing a lot different than what I showed you. But if you choose production in terms of the environment, it says send it over here instead. When I chose non-production, it said just work with it in the way that you would normally build a VM and connect it into your virtualized network. Okay, so you can see how powerful this is from one interface. Vaughn, did you have to know anything about, the fact that this was going to an ACI, an APIC, the ACI here, or was it actually going over to do the virtualized networking? You didn't have to know any of that. You simply said, what? I need an application profile. You found a template that was already created for you. You answered the questions that you needed to make sure it was actually put where it needed to. And in the background, CloudCenter then, when it went to the deployment, that's when it ended up using the cloud orchestrator. Okay, the orchestrator is a separate product. Okay, that's not a separate product, but it's on a separate machine. And then takes all that, puts it together, and distributes it to where it needs to go. Okay, so that's where the orchestrator comes in, essentially deploying the rest of it. And when it's handled, it then reports everything back to the CloudCenter that it's been handled and it's done.
I like the terminology that they're using, because, well, I guess since I'm a band geek from back in the day, the person at the front of the orchestra conducting what's going on and knowing where all the pieces are going to come into play. And that's exactly what we did. And that's what you were just showing us here is the orchestrator or the orchestration part of it did all of that stuff where you were logging into those particular pieces.
Yeah, correct. So I was just trying to show you that, even though we just worked in CloudCenter, and Vaughn, I could have easily said, see, it's deployed, and you would have agreed with me. But in the background, if nothing was running, Vaughn, you wouldn't have known one way or the other, okay, in reality, unless it was actually working, right? Now, Vaughn has the ultimate test if she's a customer. I don't have any of that up. Even though I go, well, it's showing us deployed, it doesn't mean anything. But here we showed you where it's actually connecting to all those different components on its own, doing what it needs to, okay? So that's kind of the key in what we wanted to make sure that we at least took a look at, okay? So if we go over to deployments then, well, now I have these things deployed and running. This is where you also can take actions. Notice that there are plenty of them to take, but what we want to look at right now is we want to terminate this thing. So I want to make sure I terminate this because it's costing more and more money as I leave it running, and it's not going to show up yet. It takes a few minutes for it to generate the cloud cost of itself, okay? So we'll probably come back to this at some point, and Vaughn might remind me to check that a little bit later on. We'll see. It might cost anywhere between $1 to $35 for all that I know, okay? So that's one of those unusual things that we can see, okay, when you start deploying things into the cloud. All right, so Vaughn, once we actually have kind of got to that particular point, and we've now terminated our application, we want to take a look at just a couple of other things too, which is over on the left-hand side in terms of the CloudCenter. So I'm trying to hover it so it doesn't keep accordioning on us. If you go into the marketplace here, the marketplace shows you some of the other apps that are actually available to you that are not imported as well. So for example, if I hover over this, okay, notice it says Apache Mesos, or Mesos, however you say that. Notice you can have a one-time usage fee or a per-hour node. So you can actually charge different ways if you actually choose to do something like this. And everybody will actually do something a little bit different depending on what they need here. So they chose something like this where they wanted to do that. You just simply click on it, and then, of course, you can actually import it, and then you would actually be able to set up how much this would actually cost for your particular tenants if you wanted to make that work. Here's some of the same things. We've actually added a few of these already in there, but they have a marketplace where that can be done. We can also talk about the idea here, once we get into that, of the environments that we've been talking about. So let me click on environments here for a moment. And now, Vaughn, you can see that from what we ran, which of course is this idea here, okay? Right now, notice that there's non-production, okay? So non-production, Vaughn, me just running that particular Splunk machine for you in the little time that we had it up, about $33. Yeah. All of a sudden, it can add up in its cost and time.
Just from the time that you spun that up and that we've been doing this episode.
Yeah, because it wasn't actually there before. Yes.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so it does show you that.
Be careful.
Well, a complete deployment, yeah, at the beginning does cost, but after that it comes to the hourly charge. So that's where we talk about the nickel and diming. So
Mhm.
you go, oh, 3 cents an hour, that sounds reasonable, but spinning it up, getting it already, it costs a bit more money.
Yeah, and if you were kind of playing around just to see, oh, maybe we should go this route. No, you should probably have a little bit better of a plan before you just kind of spun up servers here and there and like, oh, I don't need that later. Like,
Yeah.
just watch it.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you start doing stuff like this as well. Okay. All right. So, Vaughn, that leaves us really with a few minutes left that we have. That once we've seen all that, right, essentially we've shown you the majority of what can be done at a high level. Now, I haven't gone into all the details or any of the details of anything here, but now I want to take you on the other end of it too. Okay. So, some of the things I've just shown you here, it's kind of been a mix of both the tenant administrator or the person that has its own tenant administration, being able to build up an application profile, deploying it in their environment. That's where somebody that actually was a tenant would do. But I also showed you where you could see the actual idea here, that in the background, you can go and check all the other components and see that it's built up and doing what you needed to as well. Well, now we want to talk about some of those other features and that they're important as well, which is the idea of administration and governing is where we want to go. So this is, of course, then the entire cloud administrator who's normally in charge of multiple tenants. So if I click on admin, now over on the left-hand side, we can now begin to see just a few different things here. So on the admin template and everything that you see, notice it breaks up into infrastructure, users and permissions, which we've already seen here, usage and fees, reports, you name it. Let's come down here to usage and usage plans for a moment. And currently there is one particular usage plan. If I click on create a usage plan, you can see that there's some details in here that we can begin to add in. So we say that this is a plan for Vaughn. And now I can actually choose what type of plan is she on. Is she paying the VM per hour? Okay. Is she doing this by a subscription plan? Is there a bundle that we're tying this together? And we haven't talked about bundles yet, but we'll talk about those in a moment. Is she on a predefined bundle called a budget bundle, or is she actually in the unlimited subscription? So you can choose whichever one you want. The default looks like it's set here for VM per hour, so we'll just leave it there. How many hours? The maximum number of VM hours usage allotted each month. So Vaughn might be able to limit her cost by saying, I only need 800 hours, or whatever it might be per month, okay? Or 200 hours, whatever it might be, okay? You can even have usage increment units. 11 minutes of actual usage with 10-minute increment units can be metered out as 20 minutes. Now, what they're telling you is this is how they'll charge you, right? So if you go over that 10 minutes, and even if it's 11 minutes, it actually charges you for 20 minutes is what it does. So it doesn't do like 11, 12, 13 to do that. Enable rollover. This is nice, which I don't know if anybody would actually end up doing. If checked, any unused VM hour balance will roll over to the next month. That's a really neat feature for those of us that remember paying for our phone, the initial phones, where you had those charges by the minute. Like you never got your minutes rolled over initially.
As we're going through this, all I'm remembering is old cell phone plans.
Yeah.
The rollover minutes, and that was like a big selling point. Like, oh, you get your rollover minutes, and I think we had that, and we had like ungodly amounts of minutes because we never really used them, but it was the selling point of that particular plan.
Right. And then, of course, you can even make it only visible to, the tenant administrator too. And here, of course, are the fee plans. You kind of get the idea. Do you charge a monthly fee for the usage? What about overage limits, overage rates? Is there a one-time fee that's involved? See if I can, it won't let me move it that way. Let me see if I can move it that way. That way we can zoom in. But you can actually see that there's a lot here.
But good ways to kind of give yourself some safeguards as to make sure you're just not running up the clock or really running up the bank account.
Right. So I'm not going to create a plan because we don't really need one, but just wanted to show you the ability to do so. The next one here is the idea of the bundle. Now here, notice I don't have any bundles created, and I've got a couple of options where I can select that blue button. And here, basically about the same things, right? Name, description. But now notice that on this one, because of what I chose originally, okay, so usually you can actually see where it says VM per hour, or do I want to use a predefined idea that we had before. So I could do budget-based versus the idea of hourly-based. Set the number of hours again, and even limit what apps that Vaughn might get access to if I wanted to, as well as an expiration type. Now, this is important. I can say there's a fixed day that I'm expecting this particular, usage here to expire, or I can set it for a period of time. I can say how much it's actually going to be costing for that bundling fee that we're actually doing. Trying to make sure we can see that. And I can make sure that's only visible to the tenant admin itself if I wanted to. So there's the idea of also creating a bundle. Now, once you do that, right, on those application profiles that we were creating for the deployment, we add in those features. And Vaughn, that means that I don't have to go in and recalculate how much it costs for me as a tenant administrator, how much it's going to cost you. I simply send you the bill, and what? In the background, what's happening? CloudCenter is doing it all for you. So that's what I do is I just say, here's the bundle that she's in, and all that's actually already set up too. Okay, so there's quite a bit of other information. You can also, of course, create different tags as well. So how do you want to actually be able to relate them back to these environments that we talked about? So you can create that. You can, and this one's actually the easiest one. There's not a lot here. You just simply type in a name, okay, and that creates your tag for you. So no real gigantic effort there. The other ones that we have that I wanted to go, up here at the top, okay? Now, Vaughn, if you wanted to be able to create your own special image, so let's say that Vaughn wanted something on her own here, well, we can do this too, where now, notice that these are the actual ready images that are added in, which essentially for us, again, are the way that we spin up the virtual machines, having the operating systems on them. So let's say, for example, here for Vaughn, let's do the 12.04 with web apps. Actually, let's just do the plain one here. Do the plain one. Yeah, no, let me do this one, because this one doesn't have any mappings. You can see where there's a cloud mapping here. But on this one, I can select Manage Cloud Mapping. And now I can say, hey, where is this thing going to run? And it allows me to run it inside the vCenter or the USCD. And then I add the mapping in. And from this point here, you would actually type in the name of what that image is going to be. Ubuntu 12.04 for the Cloud ID image. And even more if there's actually other advanced instance types that we want to do. So this gives you the ability to customize how you want this deployed as well. Okay, so we're not adding any of that in there. We're just trying to show you that's a possibility. Additional services. These are all of the available services right now that you can have access to. And if I scroll over to the right-hand side, I can simply create my own custom service by adding this in. And this is where you do want to make sure that you pay attention to a few of the details as well. In a new service type, remember that all these services are essentially running in virtual machines. Okay? The default one is right here where it says virtual machine with an agent. So the CloudCenter, when you build a virtual machine, Vaughn, it adds in a little piece of software. That little piece of software is what connects it so that you can manage it and do what you want to. Okay? You can see details behind it. You can do all that. That's usually the one that you're probably going to go with the majority of the time. But Vaughn, there's also this one, which is the virtual machine without an agent. The virtual machine without an agent doesn't install that client, and that allows this to run, but there's no visibility into that. So you can tell that you have a virtual machine running, but you don't really get any of the details here at all about it. So the idea here is that it essentially runs on your network like a black box. So it's there, it's connected to your network, but you don't know anything about it, okay? And then that means you have to do all the discovery. Then there's external, okay? Now, Vaughn, notice the way that this one is described here. No virtual machine is launched. So you're creating an external service, but no virtual machine is actually created here. And that's because the virtual machine is created somewhere else, but you're just creating a service to help you to connect to that, okay? So this type that you have here, okay, it's normally used if you're actually adding something into a cluster that, in other words, it's already existing, is what you're actually seeing here a lot of times. So if you don't need to build one, but you simply need to add in another virtual machine, such as for clustering or high availability, you, of course, can get access to that and get that in there as well. All right? So those are some of the available services. We are not going to create one. So I'm going to click Cancel down here. And our last little piece that I want to make sure that I show you is not located underneath the admin center, but I go back to the main menu, which pushes me all the way back out to the cloud, to the actual CloudCenter. I'm going to scroll down to where it says More. And then if I can also, see if I can, let me scroll out and then zoom in again. We're going to go down to policies, and we want to talk about just a couple of different policy types that are here. Okay. Now, there's 3 different policy types, okay, that you have. Action policies, scaling policies, and aging policies here. Action policies is exactly like it sounds. Okay. The very fact is it determines what action a particular system will end up needing to trigger an alert. So if it senses this, what am I going to do with it? Scaling here is scaling in and scaling out. In other words, dynamically expanding or elasticity is also what we're talking about. Can we do automatic scaling? Well, if you don't choose the VM like we just showed you with the images that has that addition in there, the agent installed, you can't do that automatically. You have to kind of do that manually, which is a big pain. Okay, so you can do that as well. And then aging policies, essentially, once again, how long an application is deployed, it will remain alive until we tell it to stop. Okay, so we can actually say, here we'll age out after that point, and then that will actually let you do the so. So here they give you an example of just about all 3 of these where you can see that. Sends a notification when job status change, sends a notification when email or any of the enabled cloud goes down, sends a notification when the storage usage hits or goes above 80%. All of those are actually just different action policies that you can see. Let's see if I click on scaling policies here. Is there a scaling policy? It just has production scaling. None of the details really listed out for us. If I want to see the details, let me see, can I do that? And now you can edit some of those details about what's happening here, how that's going to end up working out. Now, Vaughn, so it makes sense. But there's a neat little icon here that I just want to briefly mention right here at the end. Vaughn, I can get the idea of editing, which is what this one's about. What do you think the little trash can's for?
That usually means throw it away.
Yep, delete it, okay? But here's where it's neat, which is this one. Share this policy, okay? So remember that when we talked about the idea of the CloudCenter, that it has to be deployed in every environment, right? So you have different environments. You can actually end up realizing something as far as different places or locations go, that what if you build this all up for one environment? But Vaughn, my company grows so well, I need a second one that's out there. Vaughn, I don't have to recreate these things, okay? What we can simply do is we can share it by simply doing this, and that spreads it and allows us to be able to reuse some of the things that we took some great deal of time and patience to make and create and do what we wanted to as well.
Goes back to one of the key points of all of this is scalability.
Right.
Okay, I got it here, just move it on over, and then poof, you're done. You can scale up.
Yeah, so it's really neat. All those features that we've talked about in terms of creating like application profiles, those 2 can be exported or imported because they're not tied to any one particular machine. All that is programming that's actually in the background that helps us out. So CloudCenter itself is very diverse, and Vaughn, in these past 2 episodes, we've kind of shown you what it can basically do. Now, just when I say that, Vaughn, this may be overkill, but it's always easier for you to connect the dots together about what can be done if you see it, rather than me just saying, just make sure you know this, which is essentially what we have. So just kind of remember those key points, right? When you start to do this and use the CloudCenter, what it really helps us to be able to make sure that we do, we go ahead and we model what we want, okay? And then we deploy it, right? The modeling takes place in the CloudCenter. The idea of the deployment really does end up taking place in the orchestrator itself, and then we manage it back in the CloudCenter again in everything that we do. We showed you how it connects to the different hardware, even though we essentially used one single interface to do it. It can connect to any of the components that we need to and deploy it the way that we need to. And then we also showed you the idea of the administration and governance policies that can actually be created, as well as shared out to other cloud centers that are actually needed. Okay, so Vaughn, that's hopefully a good demonstration of some of the basic things that can be done. You want to continue to learn more, and even some of the advanced tools, we'll be going over some of that as well. But overall, though, this will at least get you started. Take a look at it again. Make sure you go over those details, and you'll be ready for that exam.
All right. Always great to take those guided tours through our different little areas, and in this case, the CloudCenter. So thank you so much for that, Ronnie, and thank you for joining us. But we are going to sign off for IT Pro TV. I've been your host, Vaughn Smith.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching. IT Pro TV.